Welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast, where today's brightest minds in the medical device industry go to get their most useful and actionable insider knowledge, direct from some of the world's leading medical device experts and companies.
Are you ready to take your medical device development to the next level? Greenlight Guru is the leading QMS software built exclusively for the MedTech industry. With Greenlight Guru, you'll stay compliant with global regulations while accelerating innovation and time to market. No more paper trails or complex spreadsheets, just a single source of truth to manage your entire product lifecycle. Join the growing list of MedTech professionals who've made compliance easier and faster with Greenlight Guru. Learn more at www.greenlight.guru. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Etienne Nichols. I'm the host for today's episode. Today with me to talk about IEC 60601 and the changes that are coming is Leo Eisner. He's the founder and principal compliance consultant of Eisner Safety Consultants. And he's known as the IEC 60601 guy, named so by the founder of Greenlight Guru, John Spear, no less. Leo provides top-tier product safety compliance and regulatory support to the medical device industry, and he focuses on detail and quality to ensure his clients' compliance needs are met. His expertise spans the IEC 60601 series, ISO 15223, and ISO 2417. He's helped hundreds of SMEs and Fortune 500 companies achieve compliance. He's also reviewed and generated many product safety and labeling sections for European technical files. And as an expert member of the IEC 60601-1 development team, Leo has shaped both the third and fourth editions of this standard, and I know he's working hard on the next edition as well, which is what we kind of want to talk about today. So before we get into all that, Leo, how are you doing today?
Doing great. We're getting back from the UK after a month. I'm sort of getting adjusted back to US time, I guess.
I understand that. I don't think it's been a while since I've spent a month overseas, but just spending a few weeks, it can mess you up. So I can only imagine what you're going through right now. While you were over there, you were working on IEC 60601, isn't that right?
Yeah, spent a week in London at BSI in Chiswick, and a week at the general meeting in Scotland, which was a great place to be. That's where I caught COVID for a week and lost vacation time with my wife and daughter, which was a bummer, but they got to meet family, which was nice.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sorry that you had to experience that, but I'm glad you were able to get some work done, I suppose. Sometimes we wish, I'd rather spend time on the vacation than work. But let's talk about the work that you did. What is going on with 60601?
Well, we're plugging along. There's 12 different groups or working groups, which are the fragments that are currently being put together. And it spans a large array of different expertise, from physical environments to user interfaces, which is the working group I'm in charge of with another expert or co-convener. And we're dealing with alarms, usability, information supplied by the manufacturer, or labeling, as some people are used to calling it, or marking and labeling. And also we have another subgroup or subsection called user interface aspects, which deals with visual alarm, visual displays, and I can't even think of all the groups, controls, voice output, preset controls in the for operation, voice input, gesture input. And we haven't set all that up yet because that's an area that's still new that we're working on. So there's a lot of TBDs in that section. Then there's material hazards is another group, which includes biocompatibility, gas pathways. What else is in that group? There's
well, I might stop you for just a second because I'm curious. It takes a long time for a standard to get updated, to go through one of these revisions. When do you anticipate this coming out? And I know that's probably a moving target, but maybe a follow-up question to that would be, why do people need to be thinking about this now?
So the plan right now is 2029, 2030. I don't think we're going to quite hit the target based on what's happening right now. And I'll get into that a little later, I think would be better than talking about it right now. The reason to start thinking about it now instead of waiting is planning and understanding what's going to happen will affect your design and development cycle. Your timing is important because some products have a very long development cycle, like MRIs, gamma, and fusion pumps, all have very long development cycles. Some other products might have shorter development cycles, but you want to start planning to understand one of the very first steps I always push on all my clients, I shouldn't say push, but encourage, is knowing what are the current standards out there or even new standards that are being developed so they can design their products to current or state-of-the-art standards. Think about Europe is always pushing for state-of-the-art.
Yeah.
And in the US, they're pretty good with the FDA about keeping up with state-of-the-art standards, even if they don't call them state-of-the-art standards. They have a very big group in the Standards and Conformity Assessment Group of FDA. They have probably the largest group, regulatory-wise, around the world that are involved in standards development. There are, I believe, 18 people from the FDA involved in the fourth edition of 60601. And I think, I don't know the exact numbers, there's between, I think, 200 and 400 people involved in the fourth edition of 60601. I'd have to ask the project leader to know the exact number. There's 64 people in my working group.
Wow. Wow.
Some of the working groups have only 20 to 30 people. Others have, I think there's one or two working groups that have more than our size, but most of them are smaller than 64. And our group keeps going up and down a little bit.
And just about everybody who is designing or developing a medical device, if it has any kind of electrical component at all, they're likely going to be interacting with 60601. And it's really, you touched on the development cycle. So if you have a medical device that you're working on right now, you're getting started, or maybe you're in the middle of it with a few years down the line, how does that affect you as you near the completion of this standard? You also maybe near the completion of your product. Is there what do you recommend as a consultant and just as a professional in the industry when new standards come out as you near your submission timelines as a medical device company?
So there's always some type of adoption period, but you want to always be ahead of the curve to know what's coming. So you're not surprised, because that adoption period may be shorter than you expect. And so knowing what's coming is better than being thrown to the wolves, that you have to meet it and you've already designed it and you're not ready for it. So knowing what's coming, and you could adopt to, okay, I see this coming. I know these changes that I have to adopt to. Start designing to it now with the knowledge that, yeah, there may be some changes, but I see it coming. So when it gets to the later CDVs, and I'll explain that in a minute. So there's the CD is the committee draft. So that's the first round. Then there's committee draft for vote. And then there's the FDIS, final draft international standard.
Okay.
Which is just before publication. Then it's an IS, international standard. So final draft international standard might have some minor typos or other things that get corrected before it's published. But, or they don't do any technical changes between an FDIS and a publication. They'll do technical changes for CD, or they'll take comments and do technical changes between a CD to CDV and CDV to an FDIS, but not an FDIS.
Okay. Okay. And you had also mentioned, so just as you're mentioning those comments, what are the kind of comments that you look for from the audience? What would you request from those listening?
So if there's something that doesn't make sense because physically you can't design a product because the requirement doesn't make sense for whatever reason, the comment needs to be cohesive enough, though, that they give a reason and give a recommended change that will work as well. Not just that this is junk. You have to give you have to give a proposal that's reasonable as well. If you just say, I don't like this, it's going to get ignored. So you need to give a proposal that's substantial and reasonable, or give maybe two options might work as well. Or look at a risk mitigation process, potentially. We're trying to go away from risk analysis or risk mitigation out of this version of the standard and go more towards prescriptive testing is one of the architecture requirements from the architecture document. So we have two guiding documents that is running this project, the architecture specification and the design specification that started this project.
What would you say are some of the biggest changes or biggest challenges that may come from implementing some of the changes? Either one, however you want to tackle that. I'd be interested to hear any specifics.
Well, some are going to be that there's some totally new concepts, I think, that are going to come into play. Some are new tests that, like, one is wireless coexistence has been a US requirement, but has not been anything internationally. That's getting adopted into this version of the standard that would be then become internationally a requirement. There's some things, I think, in the what's called PEMS, or Programmable Electromedical System section, which they're looking at software as a medical device, software in a medical device, firmware, software, apps, OS related. So 62304 has started being rewritten as a second edition back in, I think it was April or May of this year. It just started off again for the second or third time. I couldn't tell you. It's not a project that I've ever been involved in. It's not my space at all, not my expertise. But it's getting into a lot of clinical aspects, which is a lot more thorough than I think it's looked at before. It's getting into physiological closed loop controllers, which is what is the existing 60601-1-10 standard. So one of the aspects of the fourth edition is all the collateral standards, the 1-X standard. So 1-2, the EMC, 1-6, the usability, 1-8, the alarms, 1-10, the physiological closed loop controllers, 1-11, the emergency medical systems or environment standard, and 1-12, the home healthcare environment standards, all of those are getting rolled into the general standard instead of being all separate. And that way it'll help us do maintenance of the standards better. Because when in the third edition, as we updated the general standard, then we had to update the collaterals, then we had to update the particulars. We're still updating the particulars when we did third edition amendment 2, which that was done in 2020, and now we're in 2024. It should have been done by the end of 2023, and it's still rolling.
Gotcha.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
And it's messy. So with the collaterals being all in one standard now, that's the concept. It'll make it easier to maintain when we do one rev of the fourth edition. Once that happens, then all the particulars can rev right after that. And you don't have like this rolling issue that is harder to maintain. So that's one of the concepts.
Gotcha. Where do people go to see what is going on as far as so that they can make those comments or make those suggestions?
So right now, there's none of the fragments are out quite yet.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. So the first probably 3 fragments, it looks like. I actually talked to the project leader maybe an hour ago. I texted him and asked to talk to him about the specific question because I wasn't sure fragments were going to go out. And I think it's just the first 3. So working group 37, 38, and 39. So the general requirements, which are going to cover what everyone knows as classification, but we're going to call them categorization now, which are what categories of device. So like class 1 or class 2, which is power source, not like class 1 of FDA or class 2 of FDA. Or I'll pull up categorization here on my screen. Where do I have that? I'll pull it up in a minute. Oh, I know where I have it. It's on the screen. Here it is. Or if it's internally powered, being battery operated, or if it's what type of applied part. So those are things that people already know. But another one that's newer in the list, let's find one that's new. Oh, is it single or multiple use? Is it single patient, multiple use? Is it multiple patient, multiple use, which is a new one for categorization in 60601. It's existed elsewhere because it's sort of referenced in 15223-1 for the symbols, but it hasn't been referenced in 601. Another one, let's see, another one that's new that we're going to have is mobility we're looking at. So is it stationary? Is it fixed? Is it not fixed? Is it transportable? Is it portable, handheld, stationary, etc.? And there's others. I'm not going to go through them all. So that's one of them. Then let's see. Let's go back to the list of groups. So 37 general requirements also includes essential performance, risk analysis, and other things. And it's not going to, we're not with the CD, we're not going to have all the requirements set out. It's going to be, as Brody would say, it's a fragment of fragments.
Yeah.
At this point. So it's going to be a partial look at where we're at this point. For 38 physical environmental hazards, we're looking at operating temperatures, humidity,
Vibrations, or let's see.
torque and vibration, all that stuff. So the stuff that's typical in 1-11, 1-12, temperature, humidity. There's one other, and I'm just totally blanking. Oh, here it is. Looking at transport, storage, operation, temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure. That's what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. Going back to physics.
Earthquake, physical security, battery management systems, ingress protection. What other things are hiding in this group? Those are some of the things. They're not going to have everything in that. I don't know that battery management system is going to be in there at this point, or earthquake protection. I know some of the environmental stuff, this more the temperature and transport, storage, operations stuff's going to be in there probably at this point.
What do you?
I'm
curious what's driving a lot of the change. So is it primarily organizational, or do you anticipate this changing how medical devices are designed in the future?
I'm not quite sure I understood the question or the driver of the question.
Yeah. So the revision of the standard, it's my understanding is a lot of it is you're organizing things a little bit differently to be a little bit more of a almost like a modular approach. And maybe I'm misunderstanding that. Will the content change how devices are made in the future, aside from obviously there's going to be additional testing that will be done, and there'll be different ways to interpret the standard? What if I'm designing, you mentioned an infusion pump earlier in some of the timelines. If I am designing an infusion pump today with the existing standard, and I'm going to look at this standard 3, 4, 5 years from now, how will I change my design, do you think? Are there any things like that?
So
that didn't make any sense, did it?
Not totally. Let's remove the infusion pump from the question more. Okay. Let's make it more broad and say, let's look at a medical electrical piece of equipment. One of the reasons the standard's being updated is we're looking at the risks and seeing that there's additional risks or hazards that we haven't identified previously that now we've identified through this process. And over time, we've identified more risks or hazards that we need to mitigate. And so through this design document that we've developed over time, which there was a group of people that had been working on this, which I was not involved in, but I've commented on it significantly. And that was noticed, is how it was pointed out to me at one point recently, in a good way, not a bad way.
Yeah.
That's guided how we've put this project together. And so the 12 fragments are basically separated in different hazard groups. So physical, environmental hazards, material hazards, software hazards or PEMs, electrical hazards, mechanical hazards, thermal and fire hazards, optical radiation hazards, ionizing radiation hazards. These are all the working groups. I'm just telling you the titles. The one that, well, there's two that don't say it in the title, general requirements, but there's still hazards in there. It's just not in the title. My working group's called user interface aspects, but there's hazards around user interfaces, including all labeling and information to be provided. Well, those are mitigations, the lowest level of mitigation, but.
Right. Okay.
So they're all grouped in different types of hazards.
Okay. I'm always curious about how we reached the conclusion to do this versus that, especially in regulations or standards. Go ahead.
So over time, we've learned more right? And from that knowledge, we've adding that information into the standard because we've learned how to mitigate those hazards.
Yeah.
So we're putting that knowledge base into the standard is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I get that. I guess what I was trying to say is sometimes people talk to me about regulations. They're like, oh, regulations can be so boring, but the things that lead up to putting that into the regulation is seldom boring. It's usually a big historical thing,
Well, I put it this way, it's usually shocking.
right. Well, yeah, especially for 60601.
Well, the problem is everyone thinks it's electrical only,
I
and
know.
this standard is anything but just electrical.
Right.
That's where people get way astray on this standard. And one of the recommendations one of my business partners and I posed was this standard should also be for orphan devices that are non-electrical,
Mm, yeah.
that it addresses biocompatibility, sterilization, cleanliness, gas pathways now, uh, thermal fire issues, labeling issues. It's going to reference ISO 20417, which is labeling across all medical devices now.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, that's a good standard.
Any other things that you think people really need to know about this upcoming change?
There's lots of things to
Yeah.
need to know.
Uh, what can we get across in the podcast and maybe point people to the detail later so that they can make those comments?
So there's going to be another document. It's called, let me pull it up. Uh, Here it is. Here's the name to it. Okay. So there's going to be a committee draft for vote coming out mid-December is the schedule, if it comes out on time, for the International Electrotechnical Vocabulary, so IEV, Part 880, Electrical Equipment, Electrical Systems, and Software Used in Healthcare. And it's the vocabulary we're using for the fourth edition, but it's also going to be distributed to, I thought it was going to TC 210 as well, which is the more what I would call quality system and management and the symbols group, which I'm involved in. And it deals with ISO 20417, which I'm involved in as well. Because this has definitions for medical devices or uh, healthcare definitions, but also definitions for 601, for software-based healthcare equipment. So some of there's 21 sections in it. It's massive. There's 400-ish definitions in it. So it's a big document. The main sections are alarm systems, circular economy, classifications, which I think they're going to change into categorizations would be my suggestion, since that's what we're going to call it in 601, but maybe not, I don't know. Cleaning, disinfection, sterilization, which is not something that's directly a 601 thing, obviously. Connections, which I'd have to look at to understand what they mean by that exactly. Electrical hazards, that's a very 601 based concept, I would think. EMC, electromagnetic compatibility. Environment, which I'm sure gets into some of the hospital environment and issues. Equipment and its parts and accessories. What are all those different types of definitions? General, generic definitions. That's just the title of the section. information supplied by the manufacturer. So I'm sure that gets into some of the 20417 stuff. Mechanical hazards, organizations, people, and roles. So I'm sure part of that gets into 1345 and probably 9001. Physiological closed loop control. So that's 1-10. Processes, which probably is a 1345, 9001 type area, I suspect, without looking at it closely. I don't know every one of these sections inside out, obviously.
Yeah.
Protection against hazards. There's several routes, I'm sure that goes. Quality, 1345, 9001, maybe other areas. Risk management. That sounds like 14971 to me.
Yeah.
I would hope.
It better be.
Security.
Okay.
I'm not sure I looked at that yet. Software usability. So my work group that deals with user interface aspects, we deal with a lot of these areas. The primary ones are alarms, usability. Where's the other one? Information supplied by the manufacturer. Those are the three biggies for my group.
Nice.
We have a lot of impact on all of those. So one of the questions you asked are, which are the fragments that are going to come out to be viewed and commented on first, which are 37, 38, and 39. So the general requirements, physical environments, and user interface aspects, including labeling and information to be provided. So probably about the end of this month, early in December, it'll get published as a CD. So if you're a national committee member through AMI in the US, or a national committee member through whatever country you're a member of, you'll have access if you're a member of 62A, which is IEC SC 62A, if you want to get to the nitty part. Outside of that, then you'll be able to see it through what's called the online standards development tool, which is a new database system. And as of January, all IEC and ISO standards are going to get developed through that. Is any new projects. I think there's other requirements that are outside the scope that I don't know the details. It's going to be a huge lift, I think.
And if you send me that link, we can put that in the show notes. Maybe people can easily find that so that they can.
Well, I can give you a link to the training for the online standards development tool, but there's no direct access to seeing a standard through OSD unless you're a member body.
Gotcha.
For the specific standards committee. And once it's published, then you get a link to that specific document.
I see.
So once it's published, you'll get that link, then you can see, and depending on your role, you'll see the document based on that role. So I'm a leader for working group 39, but for all the other working groups, I can't actually access the other working groups' OSD documents at all. I can't see any other working group's documents, even as a convener within fourth edition. I don't see any other working groups' documents currently.
Right.
Because right now, all 12 working groups are working independently. Once we get further along at some point in the process, right now, the schedule is after, is it the second CDV? I think at the second CDV is when we're planning to switch to a merged document from the fragments. But when I was talking to the project leader this morning, he said because the schedule may shift, we're not sure when we're going to merge at this point.
Yeah.
So that may change.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a lot of changes are coming. What are you most excited about?
Well, I call this my retirement package. Just keeping people informed and that
Yeah.
it's such a new set of big changes that just keeping people informed and trying to keep everyone excited about it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is a lot. And I'm learning a lot as I go too and being involved. I'm spending a huge amount of time on this. I don't get paid for it, but I get to talk to a lot of people about it and I'm learning a lot. I'm
Yeah.
learning huge amounts because every time I'm in meetings, there's something new I learn all the time. That's one thing I like is always learning something new every day.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't feel like I'm living.
It's important to keep living. That's good. Yeah.
Yes.
Keep living as long as you're alive. Um,
Well,
it,
yeah, that's important.
it's sad that the number of people who aren't and are. So anyway, not to get into the philosophical side of things, but
Well, you're sounding like Subi now.
I do hang out with him sometimes. Oh, he and I recommend the same books. It's so funny. But
Yes, it's
anyway,
not surprising.
yeah. Subi Sade, for those who aren't familiar with the Combinate podcast. I don't know, there's something about maybe there's something about what draws someone to be a podcaster. Has a similar set of interests. I'm not sure what it is.
Well,
But
you look like you're in a basement right now, just sort of like Subi's setup.
it's not a base, it's actually it's kind of an industrial part of town. So there's just an empty part of a factory that someone rented to me as an office. So it's worked out. But
Oh.
yeah, it's a strange place to be for sure. But very cool. I am excited to see what is coming and how this is going to change some of the things of the industry. Any last piece of advice you want to give the audience before we close it out? We'll put links in the show notes later for people to check things out, but any last piece of advice?
Well, just keep updated and ask questions. And if you have any concerns about how things are going, let the leadership of 62A or what's called AG50, which is the leadership of the fourth edition, which I'm part of, know what's going on and we'll feed it back up to the right people. And we're happy to, we're trying to be as transparent as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
We
something we
want to make
forget.
this good
Yeah.
and usable, not like hard to use.
It's not change for the sake of change, which I think some people in the industry get a little bit pessimistic sometimes, thinking, "Oh, they're changing it again." But the goal is for improvement and to cover additional risks that may not have been covered in the first one. So I think what you're doing is great, and I hope
Yeah,
people
and it's
will offer
also
their
to support, even though it's not a requirement, it's to support making it easier to get through the regulatory process too, because a lot of what's coming through this is meeting the regulatory requirements. Like gas pathways is part of something that comes up through like the ventilator standards, but it applies to other things outside of that. And so bringing it up brings up that you need to think about it for other things. Or we're talking about doing test planning, which is something regulators expect you to do. And so that was the meeting I was in before this podcast. And doing that up front is going to benefit you in the long run for a lot of reasons. It'll make going to the test lab or doing your own internal testing better because you'll have thought about it properly and scheduled it in a way that you will know the way you're headed, and you'll know what devices, what accessories, what software. So you have your plan set up instead of going in chaotically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it'll be to your benefit in the long run.
Yeah.
Short run, you might complain, why am I doing this extra work? I hear that all the time, especially from those small customers.
Yeah. If it keeps the product on the market longer and keeps it safer, it's definitely worth it in the long run. So have to keep the long run in the mind, play the long game. So
yeah,
very cool. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Leo. It's always good to talk to you and share or learn from your expertise. We're gonna have to. There's a few other standards. I know. I think I always bring this up. 15223. That was one of the first webinars I ever moderated that you did, and so
it blew up your system, I think.
it did a little bit, which it might be part of why I remember it so well.
And it was a first.
yeah, it was one of my first, but it was also one of the most technologically difficult ones. But good memories. So, but thank you so much for being on the podcast. Look forward to seeing when the standard comes out and all your work coming to fruition. So, wish you the best. And thank you so much, those for you who've been listening. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you all next time. Take care. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask a special favor from you? Can you leave us a review on iTunes? I know most of us have never done that before, but if you're listening on the phone, look at the iTunes app, scroll down to the bottom where it says leave a review. It's actually really easy. Same thing with the computer. Just look for that leave a review button. This helps others find us and it lets us know how we're doing. Also, I'd personally love to hear from you on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I read and respond to every message because hearing your feedback is the only way I'm going to get better. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.